the first thing we're going to have to do is redefine religion. And so religion then comes to mean that it's just your little faith community and you are one of many religions, and this is kind of how you work. And it gives equal validity to all religions, and it also poses this arrangement where the religion is now subservient, or it's secondary, it's subordinate to the interests of the government. That's the definition that secularism likes. Now, there's other things that secularism did in order to achieve this difference. So one of them, remember we talked about the faith community and you identifying with a community of believers. Maybe they're even a worldwide community of believers, and that's going to actually erode and chip away at your affinity for the nation state and the flag, and you're willing to go to some foreign country and die for it. Well, they don't want that. And so in order to replace that, what do we have? What's going to rival the imaginary individual identification with their religion and their community of believers? The citizen. The citizen is what's going to replace that. You're not going to think of yourself anymore as a believer in the world that is tied to a community of believers worldwide and that they have obligations upon you and you have obligations towards them. We want you to think of yourself as a citizen, which is why in every single classroom in almost most of the world today, the map that they put on the classroom wall is a political map. That your mental imaginary for the shape of the world, it's not the mountains and the rivers and the seas and the valleys and the fields of wheat and whatever you have. It's the political borders. This is your territory. This is where you live. This is your nation. This is your people. The flag is everywhere. And if you're in the United States, you pledge allegiance to the flag every morning, etc., etc. All of this trying to replace your primary identification, trying to displace that religious identity that you have and that religious affinity and identification that you have and replace it with the citizen. Now, this is not to say, we have to be very clear here, this is not to say that there's no way in which support for one's nation or affinity for one's nation can combine with your religious identity. That's not what we're saying. In fact, this happens all the time. But what we are saying is that secularism is not neutral in this process. They love that you would minimize your religious identity and affinity and affiliation and make the primary thing that you identify with and are willing to sacrifice for and certainly willing to obey the nation state and its government. So there's a historical process to this if you doubt anything that we're saying here, and you can very, very easily tell that this process is true by looking at European colonialism, especially on the Muslim world. You go to places like Egypt, Algeria, if you go to Indonesia, the occupying powers, the foreign colonial powers that came, they weren't simply just there to extract resources. A lot of people don't understand that colonialism happened in stages. The first early stage of colonialism was very, I don't want to say normal, but it's very rudimentary. Resource extraction, killing people, brutality, all horrible things, but very typical things in the broad arc of history. But as colonialism got more sophisticated and secularism started to take place and the ethno-religious state, the secular state, started to become the main form of political organization, the idea of what colonialism was doing completely changed. That's where you get into the 19th century, the 1800s, and you've got the idea of the civilization mission or the white man's burden. And now we have to civilize the barbarians and we have to change their laws and we have to change the way that society is organized. And this is where things get really interesting because they didn't stop there. It would have been even enough to prove our point that they went and they changed all the laws, which they did. In the Muslim world, for example, they replaced all of the Sharia courts or the Islamic courts with courts that are based off of the European legal codes or the penal codes of France or of England or different colonial powers. But they didn't just stop there. They also produced knowledge in and of and about the religions of the natives, of the people that were on the ground. So they were trying to affect what type of Islam was practiced. They were trying to affect the natives' understanding of their own religion. If you want an example, let's go to Algeria. When the French went to Algeria, they attempted to produce scholarship. First of all, they tried to change the Quran, but that's for another video. They also produced scholarship, meaning French Orientalists and whoever they could recruit from the elite of Algeria in order to produce information on Islam that was supporting colonial rule.